Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to the Education Quality Forum here in Kiev. During this horrible war against Ukraine, you might ask yourself, whether evaluating schools is the most important thing we can do right now in education. But actually, during crisis is when evaluation matters most to help students learn better, teachers teach better in schools to direct the resources where they matter most. In normal times, we know a lot about schools. In times of crisis, we need to better understand how we can support our schools best. And this has many different layers and perspectives. You can think of the student. How do we motivate students to learn during crisis? How do we capture not just their academic development, but also their social and emotional needs? How we can support that best? How can we support teachers to cope with challenges that go well beyond instruction? At this moment, teachers don't just need to be great instructors. They also need to be very good coaches, very good mentors, good facilitators, evaluators, creative designers of innovative learning environments, sometimes in bomb shelters. How do we look at schools, encouraging in their development? Encouraging to pursue reforms when things get tough. And how do we look at the system overall? If you think about schools, inspectorates can help to get schools an understanding of their strengths and weaknesses, what they could learn from other schools, provide support. Schools can also, assess their own strengths and weaknesses through self-evaluation within a meaningful framework that can be provided by the education systems. And also through performance measures. What are the results achieved for different student groups? Teacher appraisal is important. How do we identify the strengths of teachers? How do we support teachers in their career development? How do you recognize excellence in teaching and make it visible throughout the system? Often education systems are good, to push knowledge top down into systems, but how do we find the best experiences in classrooms, and how do we scale and spread and share them? That is very much about, evaluation. And then, of course, at the student level, how do we assess learning in the classroom in a formative way? And at the same time, also look at this from outside the classroom to understand how schools and how systems perform. I show you an example from the International PISA assessment. The length of the bar in these charts shows you the variability in student performance. And I divided this into two components. The yellow bar shows you the performance variability among schools. The larger that bar, you can see the bigger the difference between high and low performing schools. The gray bar shows you the variability of student performance inside schools. How does the performance of students differ inside the school? You can see here on the left side, in Finland, only about 5% of the performance variation lies between schools. Every school is a successful school. This is an incredible outcome of evaluation of an education system that is very transparent, where the system understands the strengths and weaknesses of schools, and where the system is capable to intervene inverse in proportion to success. At the other extreme, you can find Israel, where there is huge variability in school performance. Some high-performing schools, some low-performing schools. And the system has not been really good in, countering that disparity. Evaluation can tell us something about this. I want to show you the example of Brazil. On the vertical axis, you see the performance of schools in terms of academic outcomes. The larger the dot, the bigger the school. The smaller the dot, the smaller the school. On the horizontal axis, you see a measure of the social and economic background of students in schools. On the right side, students are in wealthy neighborhoods. On the left side, students are in poor neighborhoods. The blue dots are the private schools, the gray dots are the public schools. And it looks, blue dots provide, private schools provide better results than public schools. But, once you take into account the social context of schools, actually, there's not much of a difference between public and private schools. In fact, you can see within every group of socioeconomic context, you can see some schools that are doing really well and others that struggle. Schools that we can call statistical neighbors, schools with similar results, showing very different performance. School evaluation can help us understand what makes some of those schools successful. What can we learn to improve others? So that's the example of Brazil. And many Brazilians would say, well, poverty is destiny. If you are from a poor kind of neighborhood, you'll just get lower results than if you come from a wealthier background. And many people in Ukraine would say something similar. But now compare Brazil with Vietnam. Here you can see the Vietnamese schools are even more on the left side of the chart. They operate in even more disadvantaged circumstances, but the results are very good. And that shows us poverty is not destiny. And that can tell us, the comparative perspective can tell us, well, under similar circumstances, we can achieve better results. So that's really important. Evaluation can also tell us something about the effectiveness of resource use. On this chart, you can see on the vertical axis, again, the academic performance of a country, and on the horizontal axis, how much money does a country spend up to the age of 15 when we assess the students in school. And when you look at the performance, you can see Ukraine, still has a way to go to reach the highest performing countries, but it's also a country that spends the least per student. And actually, if you look at the results achieved in relation to the spending, Ukraine does quite well. It is above the regression line now. You look at the United States, it has better results, but actually it also spends a lot now. Estonia is an interesting example. Performs better than the United States, one of the highest performing education systems, and still doesn't spend that much. And that shows us really that money is important, but money is not everything. It often has to do with how do we utilize those resources. And that's really where school evaluation becomes very important. Schools have to think about how we configure the spaces, the people, the time, the technology, the relationships. How do we prioritize the quality of teaching? How do we support teachers well? How do we build that professional autonomy and that collaborative culture that help teachers, shape the profession? Utilization of resources is where school evaluation becomes so important. But I want to, make one more point, that it's not just about academic success. Another finding from our PISA survey shows that actually mindset can matter a lot. On the vertical axis, you see again the academic success of an education system. On the horizontal axis, you see the share of students with a growth mindset. On the right side, you can see a country like Estonia, where students believe the sky is the limit to success. Now, if I try hard, I know my teacher is going to help me and I'm going to be successful. And you can see Estonian students are also academically very good. On the left side, you can see a country like Indonesia, where students often believe, well, it's all about the intelligence I was born with. There's nothing I can do. And you can see actually students struggle academically. Mindset and academic success are not opposing ends on a spectrum that compete for learning time. No, they are two sides of the very same coin. And that really shows us that through school evaluation, we need to encourage both the academic development, but also the social and emotional development of students. Provide good signals to students to understand to what extent they succeed, to develop the right mindset. Think about the pedagogies that help, be supportive for meaningful student development. And it's not just about academic success. We could see that students with a growth mindset were more motivated to master difficult tasks. They had a greater sense of self-efficacy. They were less afraid of failure. And think about this. If you want your students to be imaginative, creative, you have to give them space to experiment. If they experiment, they take risk. If they take risk, they make mistakes. If our education systems are not very good to help students learn from and with mistakes, maybe they will not be so creative. Again, school evaluation can look at those perspectives. What kind of learning environments will help students to develop, a good sense of themselves, to collaborate with others, to live with this planet? That's really the power of this. And one last aspect, particularly in a time of war, we should never forget about the well-being of students. No? We surveyed that in our survey on social emotional skills, and we could see when you ask 10-year-olds, most 10-year-olds are happy children. You can see here they say, my daily life is filled with things that interest me, or I woke up fresh and rested, I felt active and vigorous. No? At least, a good 2/3 of students say so. But when you ask those very same question at the age of 15, you can see how these bars get much shorter, particularly among girls. No? The well-being of students dips as students grow older. No? Well, that's something that school evaluation should tell us about. No? Of course, developmental psychologists will say there are many explanations for this, but teachers and school at least need to understand those dynamics. No? So we ask ourselves, what are those key drivers of student well-being? No? What differentiates students with a strong sense of well-being from those that feel less well? No? And the answer was quite consistent across the different regions for which we have data. It all was about stress resistance, optimism, and energy that students felt. No? And now you will ask me, well, what does that have to do with school evaluation? A lot. Because the key drivers of students' energy, stress resistance, optimism, had to do with the quality of student-teacher relationships. Students always learn best from teachers they love. And that's really what evaluation in school needs to be encompassing. How can we build an environment in which teachers feel confident, in which they build positive and supportive relationships with their students, in which they have the time to know not just their subjects, but also to know their students, to understand who their students are, who they want to become, and how to be successful. And it's not just about student well-being in the narrow sense. We could see that the quality of student-teacher relationship was also a strong predictor for students' sense of responsibility, for their persistence, for their self-control, for their empathy, for their trust, for their cooperation, for their tolerance, for their curiosity, for their creativity, for their self-efficacy, for their achievement motivation. We need to get a good understanding of what kind of environments help students learn best. What environments help students to develop the cognitive, social, and emotional skills that prepare them for their future, not just our past? How can we support our teachers in ways that develop those learning environments? How can we build that collaborative culture and enable teachers to take responsibilities for the design of innovative learning environments? And what can schools do to, again, assemble the resources and deploy them where they can best use? Well, the answers to all of this you find in meaningful and good school evaluation. Evaluation that helps students learn better, teachers teach better, and schools to learn from and with each other what makes a strong education system. Thank you very much.